And it's welcome to the Sportsfan radio panel for the first time for 2024. And very special guest today, Wayne Holdsworth. Good afternoon, Wayne.
Good day, Mark. How are you?
Very well, Wayne, very well. Now, the reason we've got you on today is to talk about a very important thing. Your 17-year-old son, Mac, took his own life in October last year. And there's been an article in the Australian and the Herald Sun by Paul Amy that says you're on a mission for change to spare other families from the same heartbreak. Firstly, condolences from the panel and our viewers for your loss. Perhaps you'd like to kick it off with telling us something about it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. It's something that happened that I wasn't prepared for naturally, and it was on the 24th of October last year, where Mac normally gets up at about 6:30, 6:45 in the morning, and he hadn't. And so there was only Daisy, my 15-year-old daughter, and myself in the house, and Maggie had just taken off to drive into the city for work. And so I knocked on his door, and he wasn't in his bed, and looked to the right. And I won't go into the graphic detail, but he'd taken his own life. And so I asked Daisy, I yelled and asked Daisy to call 000, which she did. And unfortunately, I knew straight away that he had passed away because of the feel of him. And not long after that, the paramedics arrived, the police arrived, and, obviously declared him, that he passed away. It's something that I wasn't obviously prepared for, to make then a phone call to my wife, Maggie, to tell her that, Mac had passed away. And then also to ring, the other siblings as well, Joss and Ben, to tell them that their brother had just passed away was really difficult. And then obviously to greet all the families they came around and try to at least get two words out that were coherent was really hard. And as the leader of the family, trying to set some sort of tone was really hard. Having said that, I was quickly connected with a service called Support After Suicide, and Adrian Price is a person that I was connected to the following day, and I see him now once a week on a Friday as a counsellor and a guide. And he helped me get through the funeral. There were 700 at the funeral, which is quite a large number. And then getting through Christmas and then giving me the strength really to be able to say, right, okay, Mac didn't leave a legacy at 17. He was too young to do so, but I have to build that legacy for him. And Mark and panel, I've got three things that I'm going to do, not want to do, I am going to do. And that is firstly to set up a program which we've started we started the preliminary work on already to assist kids in our region to be able to have somewhere to go straight away, because at the moment there's a 5-week waiting list at Headspace, and you're going to do something between the time you need to go and the time you see somebody. I know that through research. Mac had three things also that troubled him. One was that his mum passed away 100 days before he committed suicide. Also, he was abused at work. And thirdly, he was sexually extorted. And that sexual extortion case was quite surprising, because the person that did do that made a big error. He gave Mac his own Commonwealth bank account when he paid the money into that account, instead of the one that was supposedly used for overseas that he was supposed to use. Well, the police found him and charged him, and on the 30th of January, got 5 years jail, which 5 years jail for that crime is worth 15 because of the treatment that they get inside the prison by other prisoners. And so the first thing is to set up a program for kids. The second thing is to get suicide legislation like there is in Adelaide or South Australia, and like there is being debated now in New South Wales, here in Victoria. And I'm endeavouring to connect with the hierarchy in Victorian government to put that case forward. And the third thing, and finally we got some traction in the last 2 weeks in the Australian and yesterday in the Herald Sun, is to get the number of people that have committed suicide out there. Back in the 70s, and I think a couple of panel members would remember this, that there was a campaign in Victoria around the road toll, front page, back page, you name it. It was about 1,034 people that were killed in the 70s on the road in that 1 year. And that's now reduced to 299. It's still far too many, but the effort and time and resources dedicated to that have brought it down. 800 people in Victoria in 2023 committed suicide compared to 299 deaths on the road. 800. 14 days ago, that beautiful mother in Ballarat went running and she's now missing. She has had extensive, media coverage because it's an awful story. Well, since then, 28 people here in Victoria have taken their lives. And so I will not stop until that number, not glorifying the act. There's the Werther theory that was suggested in the mid-70s that there's a copycat. If you put a high-profile person out there that has committed suicide, people will copycat that. Well, that's mid-1970s. We're in the 2024 year, and I could tell you exactly how anyone died here in Victoria because of the transcript down the bottom, the Lifeline, the Beyond Blue, etc. We all know that, and there's not a copycat syndrome out there. We can all find that out. I want to challenge that research right now, and I want that number on the front page, and we want a campaign about suicide. It's an epidemic that's not being addressed. In 2 years' time, it will be at 1,000 based upon the rate that it's been growing for the last 3 years. So, Mark and panel, that's why I'm campaigning really heavily. It's had some traction in the last 2 weeks, and I will not stop until we achieve those three aims.
Judge?
Wayne, well said, and obviously condolences to you and the family for your loss. It's the worst thing for a parent to lose a child in these circumstances. We can't comprehend it, but thanks for telling us about your young fellow. Look, the two things that interested me what you were saying. I'll come back to one of the legislation, but that number, I agree with you. I remember the 1034 campaign.
Yep.
And how successful was it when we got seatbelt legislation, drink drive legislation, the speeding rules were totally changed, the kids getting their licenses, the whole deal. Kids are a lot more responsible now. I can say that you and I were and Mark was back in the day.
Yep.
Because of that, I'd say because of that campaign.
Yep.
What is and that number's shocking, that the numbers you've told about how many suicides there are, and it's on the increase. That's the worst part of it. Why do you think it is that we're so reticent about putting this stuff on the front page of the paper?
John, that's the very question that I asked as well. And, I would think that in the last 2 or 3 weeks when I've gone out with this number, 99% of people do not know that it's 800. I was at the Seaford Footy Netball Club a couple of weeks ago and presented to the young players there, about 18 to 25 they were, and a few older blokes. And I asked the question, how many people have died on the roads this year? And a fiery put his hand up and he said, about 290. And I said, yeah, you're pretty right. I said, put your hand up if you know how many people died of suicide. No one knew. They started at 100, 200, said higher, higher. And when I got to 800, they were just gobsmacked. I've investigated it, John, and it apparently, and the papers are very loath to put in the suicide rate because of this Werther theory, the copycat. But I'm not advocating to put the act there. I'm advocating to put the number there. And that 800 is conservative because that doesn't count the number of kids, like we saw in the newspaper 2 or 3 weeks ago, that get in their car and drive into oncoming traffic to commit suicide. They're referred to as accidents. So
one is the basic idea that if we don't talk about it, there won't be a problem. But if we do talk about it, that others will repeat it. But it seems to me that if we're so ignorant about that 800 number, and I tell you I was, that means we're not talking about the subject at all.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about the subject, not educating ourselves, and we're not going to ameliorate or improve the situation at all, it seems to me. So I, for one, totally support you.
Yeah, and John, that's the point. And this is the point of getting, Paul Amy writing the story and getting traction in the Australian and the Herald Sun. It's not about Mac. We obviously are still grieving and it's really hard, but it's not about that. It's about sending a message to mums and dads and the kids to ask more than just, are you okay? That campaign is flawed because the perception is all you got to do is ask the, are you okay question. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be, are you okay? Because I ask that every day in the car when I drive Mac to either work or his footy training or basketball. And he'd say every time, and he'd use these words, I'm fine, Dad. And then we talk about the cricket or footy. If I'd said to him, Mac, have you got suicidal thoughts? Now, I know it's confrontational. There would have been a pause. And that pause would have told me that he's thinking about it. And that's the research. So 1 in 5, John, 1 in 5 people here in Victoria, here in Australia, have suicidal thoughts. So in that group of 100 that I spoke to at the Seaford Footy Club, there were 15 to 20 people that are categorised as at risk. And, we tell them to wait 5 weeks to get an appointment with Headspace. We're kidding ourselves. We're not fair income about it. And to raise the profile and to get it out there, more adults will ask the question, more kids will be susceptible to at least breaking down and working with their parents.
Hi, Wayne. Paul Dalligan here. I can only say very sorry for your loss. I just wanted to ask, on a statistical basis, is there an increasing prevalence amongst whether it's men or women or youth issue more so, or is it the stats on that are relatively constant?
It's a really good question, Paul. And unfortunately, there's a percentage increase in girls now, but it's still heavily in favour of boys taking their lives. And also the percentage of youth, which is categorised as about 16, 17 to about 23, 24, that's increasing as a percentage of the pie. And it's not really surprising, is it, Paul? Because, the pressures that the kids are associated with. I mean, Mac was a bit unusual because he had 3 things occur to him in the same short space of time. But in talking to some kids at our basketball stadium, we've got about 7,500 that play and about 2.5 that are in that bracket. In just talking to generally to them, they would say that not making a basketball team gives them anxiety. And so that resilience level that potentially, us as adults had back in the day is not there. And I hear and you would have heard this too, Paul, just recently, that the NRL have decided to not keep score of, I think it's under 8s or under 10s, and not have finals for the community rugby. And for me, that I'm not in favour of that because it doesn't teach kids at a young age to be resilient and that losing or coming second's okay.
Wayne, can I just ask about the sorry, Paul?
No, you go.
I was just going to ask about the legislation. I'm interested in that. What legislation is there elsewhere, and what are you suggesting for Victoria?
Yep, it's called suicide prevention legislation. And it's obviously relatively new in South Australia. It was last year, I think it was adopted. New South Wales are actually debating it now in their parliament, but there's nothing in Victoria. Essentially, it's legislation that, for want of a better word, profiles and dedicates a percentage of the budget to mental health. And it's not random. It's not this. It's not that. Oh, we've had a bad year. We can only afford this. It's a percentage of the budget, whatever that budget is. And that's the part that caught my eye. There's other aspects of it too, John, around, building a committee, ensuring that there's enough services out there, which is failing here in Victoria, I'm afraid to say. I think that the fact that South Australia have adopted the legislation, New South Wales are discussing it, surely it says that we need to at least investigate it and to give us an opportunity to support it and therefore get it profiled. And maybe one of their agenda items is profiling suicide.
Well, Wayne, just on a cost-benefit analysis, you'd spend 4 times, just going by the raw numbers of deaths, you'd spend 4 times the amount you're currently spending on road safety towards suicide prevention.
Yep. Yep.
That would be a big number.
Yeah, it is. And you're right, your comments before, John, about the fact that, that campaign in the 70s, the 1,034, they spent millions, not just on the education, with regard to safety belts and drink driving and better roads, better vehicles, better restrictions on kids driving, but on the actual program, the education as well. They spent millions of dollars on that.
Australia was the first place in the world to have road safety, seatbelt, compulsory seatbelt legislation. So Australia is capable, getting, thinking legislation put forward on serious subjects. And I think we dropped the ball a bit over the years, but we certainly used to know how to do this stuff.
Yeah, yep.
Wayne, you spoke about South Australia having the legislation and New South Wales discussing it. From your own research, do you know how much Victoria spends or puts towards suicide prevention, even though it might not be legislated?
No, I don't, Mark. I don't have that figure. And I think the reason that I don't have it, I've tried to research it, is that it's not as coordinated or as easily accessed, that information. And I don't want to say or brand the government or anything like that, but I think it's more not ad hoc, but it's not as organised or delivered as well as it should be. And so it's really hard to get. Like, for an example, I was contacted yesterday by a private health insurance organisation that are interested in me talking to their executive, and they alone spend a percentage of their net profit on mental health. And you wonder why private enterprise needs to do that when you've got a government that should be doing that for us. It's because there's not enough being done.
Wayne, obviously, condolences to you and the family, mate. Pretty horrible news, and love what you're doing. And one of the things that sort of I've always looked at is we have an Are You OK Day every year. Now, whether that businesses use that, I don't know. They have a day and they promote it, but I'm not sure one day cuts it. Whereas you got 365 days a year where they may not be. You may not ask that question, and you really don't give a shit about people. How do we get better, mate? Like I suppose that's honestly, how do we get better? Like, we've got Beyond Blue out there. We've got, like you've said, Headspace and these organisations, but the numbers are just going one way.
Yeah. Kuda, the Are You OK program is, in my opinion, only my opinion, is flawed, because it's the perception is that you ring up or you ask someone, are you okay? They will say, fine, David, I am fine. And then we'll talk about the cricket and footy results, because it doesn't promote the next question. The Are You OK campaign should be, are you okay? And then another question. And that's not what it doesn't give that perception, in my opinion. So my view is this, that we need to return mental health back to the community. So we as adults need to be further educated on being able to speak to people, whether they're young, middle-aged or old age, around their feelings. So, for an example, if a young boy, 17 or 18, meets a girl for the first time, they have a relationship, and then after about 6 months to 12 months, the girl doesn't like the boy anymore and goes off with his best mate. That boy is really susceptible to, anxiety, depression, etc. However, if we're able to provide him with someone to listen that's trained to say, don't let this define you, because in 2 days you will feel better, in a week you'll feel even better, and in 2 weeks' time you'll be going back to the footy with your mates playing, and you'll be looking back and it's not as big as you think it is, and to be able to access them. So what we're going to do, we're going to set up at the Frankston Basketball Stadium, we're going to set up Smack Talk. It's capital S, MAC in brackets, K, Talk, and it'll be branded in there. and we're going to train up 30 volunteers that age between 18 and about 27. They're all either players of football or basketball, girls and boys. They'll be there on a rostered basis, and we'll be opening it up to anybody that wants to come in and have a chat if they feel as though they're under pressure. I know it's only a start, but once we get it started, we'll hopefully get some traction, get some funding, and it will grow and get bigger, and the people don't have to wait 5 weeks, because that's what they have to do at Headspace. And I can guarantee you that if they have to wait 5 weeks, something will happen in that gap.
What I like about
I'm sorry if I could just jump in on that. I agree with you completely. The Are You OK Day, if I'm not okay, a yellow screensaver and a stress ball isn't going to help. You do need to take that extra next step. And I've got 3 kids, and I often say to them, "Are you okay?" But you don't get much from that cursory inquiry. You do need to probe a bit further and try and get that really what's bothering, because you will get that blanket response if you don't make that further effort.
Yeah. And Paul, like with your kids, they play sport. You know, if they're limping and they come in and they're limping, you'll say, "Oh, what have you done?" And they go, "Oh, it's a knee." "Oh, what have you done to the knee?" So you're probing because it's a physical thing. But with mental health, we simply don't do it. And that's going to take a long while for people's attitude to change, because it's just seen as something we can't see it, so it's not real. Well, I can tell you, it's bloody real.
Wayne, what I like about that program you just told us about, that it's done with their peers.
Yeah.
It's real time. They see them regularly. It's a local basis, so they feel, it's at their sports club, so they feel comfortable. Compared to the Are You OK? I mean, with the greatest respect to people who organise them, I know it's well intentioned, but I wouldn't go past saying to somebody, well, actually, I feel weird about saying to somebody, "Are you okay?" And then they say, "Yes, I am." Well, what am I supposed to do after that? Say, "Well, hang on.
Yeah.
I want to know if you've got suicidal thoughts." At a workplace, it's a bit silly because we're not living their lives. We work colleagues. Whereas your program is in their, their safe spaces. It's where they play sports, so they feel comfortable. I like it.
Oh, thanks.
Good luck to your program.
And my comments about the Are You OK Day is more designed at employers as well, as in this is something that should be looked after or looked at more regularly. Now, are you going to be open and honest with your employer if you are having issues? I don't know, but they're the people that you see 5 days a week, 8 hours, 10 hours a day. Your habits change, and I think the other thing is that it's just being able to have the conversation and understanding the words and everything like that. Like, are you okay? It's the first question, but if you don't get it, and like Paul said, kids these days are pretty lacking when it comes to words, if that makes sense. They've got their gaming and their Fortnite and all these sorts of things. So
even with my genetics, mine don't say much sometimes.
But it is so that so it is hard, and I think you're seeing it obviously raw at the moment, but you've also got the other side of it, Wayne, with regards to being the CEO of one of Australia's largest basketball organisations.
And that's it, Cooter. That's exactly it. Like we've got an opportunity, and I now see it as my responsibility to at least do something, and we may not have a major impact on the suicide rate. That might be just something that, because of, our the way in which people are built these days and programmed these days, that it's going to continue. But we've got to do something. Like sitting on our hands is like saying we give up. So we've got to do something. And I firmly believe that this will make a difference. This will at least keep the kids alive for a bit longer.
Wayne, the other thing is the ripple effect of your son's passing. You've got 3 other children, like you said, Daisy, Josh, and Benji. That's the other collateral damage, I suppose. And they're also suffering differently, I suppose, but really significantly. Now, where do they go? What help is available for them?
Well, And this is the thing too, John. I make sure that they all go to counselling. It's at least once a fortnight.
Good.
Daisy goes Tuesday nights, which is really important. And if you force someone to get counselling, it's no good. They've got to go on their own. They want to go. They need to want to go. And so they're all going, fortunately. But I see them up and down. They'll have a good day and then a bad day. But my theory is that you write down all your good days and the reasons why. And when you're having a bad day, refer to that day that you had a really good one, and it might just get you through. But yeah, they've really suffered, and that they're asking the same question that I have asked myself a million times, and that is, why didn't we see it? Why didn't we do something about it? Leading up to Mac's death, about 4 weeks before, we went on a trip to Hawaii, the whole family, and it was the best 2 weeks that we've had as a family, and it was trying to put a smile on the kids' faces, particularly Daisy and Mac, who'd lost their mum in the same year. And I'd never seen Mac as happy as he was then, And then, the night before, he was mucking around with Daisy. He was telling her that he was going to take her out shopping because it was a birthday the following week. He asked me whether, he could drive the car the next day. He was on L plates. I said, yeah, great. That was the last word he said to me. But he'd made his mind up, we think, looking at all the information about 2 months before. And so that there's a window there, I reckon. There's a window there that if I was to have said to Mac, have you got suicidal thoughts? I would have got him. But I didn't ask the question. So we're all thinking the same. We could have done more.
Wayne, you mentioned the 1034 campaign, and I still remember the saying that was, as you said, plastered on all the newspapers: declare war on 1034. And when that was published, it created outrage within the community, because finally numbers were actually put up that people could take into account. Now, you said that one of the 3 things that you're working on is campaigning to have suicide death numbers recorded, because I think that's something that really needs to be done, because until people realise the number's 800 across the community, you can't get any widespread outrage going, and what are we going to do about it? And I bet if something like that happens, then there will be votes in suicide and campaigns to prevent it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mark. It's a really good point, because I have been told that there's no votes in suicide prevention, right? And so that's probably a challenge that we're going to have. But as soon as someone puts that number up, and you have a government committed at federal and state level to lowering that number, then that is a vote catcher, because 800 people committed suicide in Victoria last year alone, here in Victoria. All the families that are associated with those 800, there's a lot of people. A bloke rang me last night. I was driving Daisy and Maggie to get some fish and chips and sit on the beach, and my phone rang, and it was an unusual number, but I took the call, and he said, "G'day, Wayne, it's Richard Evans here." I said, "G'day, Richard, how you going?" And he said, "I read your article. My daughter committed suicide 3 or 4 years ago." And he said, "I've been wallowing in self-pity, grief for that period of time. Can I help you with your program?" And so that's one person. That there'd be lots of people out there that if they saw that campaign on the front page and a government got behind it, they would vote for them.
Well, when you said no votes, that's I mean, it's shocking, but
Yes.
obviously that's a reality. And we don't hear about suicides unless it's a famous person or an AFL footballer, and we hear about it. But then it's just newspaper fodder, and that's which is horrible. What I like about what you're doing, I mean, apart from the fact you're famous to us, we know you, but you're not a household name. Your son wasn't a household name, and that I think would actually resonate more strongly with everybody, because you're a real person, a real grieving family, and you are genuinely trying to do something about it. So I actually think, and again, more strength to your arm, that what you're doing is probably more likely to be long-term effective than just a sugar hit in the newspapers about a well-known person who suicided.
Agree. Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
thanks very much for coming on the program, Wayne. It's a very difficult issue to discuss, but we really appreciate it. We think it's very, very important to get the message out there, especially to all our viewers and across our social media channels. If you think of any way that we can possibly be of assistance to you in the future, only have to contact any one of us to try and give as much help as we can.
Yeah,
Mark, thank you very much, and to the panel, thank you that you've already done an enormous amount already by having me on this morning, and I really appreciate it, and we will make a difference.
Thanks very much, Wayne.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mark.
All right, Paul, we might throw to you. Before I ask you for your 2024 season preview, there are a couple of Broncos players who wanted to get the season off to a spectacular start themselves.
Oh, I think that's a bit overplayed. They were just getting in some extra wrestling training in. We all know that wrestling's a big part of the game these days. It's part of the tackling technique. So I thought they might have thought training was still going. That's all. But what I don't like, it's such an exciting time for the game. I don't like that sort of thing is front page of the news or back page of the news. We should be more focused on what will be a very successful expansion of the game into America. It's already stacked up. V'landys has done it again. The TV revenue is there. There's a lot of gambling revenue, which for good or bad, that's a lot of money for the game. And it's a long-term deal they've signed up. This isn't just an AFL in China experiment with no criticism there. This is actually designed to get a footprint there, and it will be a success. There's a lot of logistical issues involved. There's even things like coming back into the country. You need to show that the laundry's clean, because you could bring in dirt or grass matter, and they're very strict coming back in, let alone players going to America with criminal convictions. So they've had to rush around and find laundromats on the strip that can do thousands of uniforms. And I think there's each 4 teams that are going are taking 20 security guards. And we're not talking just your local Westfield type security guard. We're talking serious beef. So the initial thoughts taking rugby league players to Vegas is like taking an AA meeting to Dan Murphy's. But I actually think that they're going to be well behaved. I think that they'll be looked after, and it will be brilliant for the game, because I'm really excited about it. I wish I'd be there.
Paul, when you say looked after, that's referring to the chaperones, isn't it?
Oh, yes. They've been warned about taking women back to their rooms quite wisely, because there's a lot of extortion attempts, and that would have been an eye-opener for the boys. But it's certainly high-level crime there that can influence sports stars, given the money that's involved. So you just have to look at the NBA scandals over the years. So I think they'll be well behaved. They'll be drilled into them that there's too much at stake here for this not to work. And it looks like it's V'landys has done it again in terms of a big event.
What odds can we get on a Nate Miles sort of hotel incident, or I won't mention other incidents of rugby league infamy, but have we got odds? They've got enough bookmakers sponsoring the NRL these days.
We did have odds for how many Taylor Swift sightings would be there and what colour lipstick she was going to wear. So you're looking at a market for sort of a player passed out in the corridor as people start their family holiday, that sort of...
That sort of thing.
Blaming it on food. Yeah, he blamed it on a gastro bug, I think. That's why.
I think the other one, Paul, would be watering plants in the reception for casinos and those sorts of just things that we expect on Bucks parties.
We've already had someone high profile falling over a pot plant in Canberra, just testing out the mobile reception 10 centimetres off the ground, I think he was doing. But we might even need Daniel Andrews there for PR if anyone gets into trouble. I'm not here today to answer questions about rugby league players in Vegas.
Paul, you started the year off with a good zinger, an AA meeting at Dan Murphy's. I mean, that's what it's going to be like with these guys. What's the difference between this thing and a sugar hit, where it's going to be fantastic for a few weeks and then totally forgotten about next year?
No, well, they've signed up a long-term deal. It's not just a one-off. They've got it on prime time, the sports channels. So it may help them that there's no NFL on, and there's no doubt that was part of the timing. that Americans love football. Every country loves football, but this football is being sold by Russell Crowe as football like you've never seen it, with no padding, no helmets apart from the basic rubber ones, and it's full contact. And they're also selling it with the best players in the game. You've got Latrell Mitchell, Tom Drabojevic. You've got explosive athletes, and they are going to be mesmerised by this. It won't just be a Mickey Mouse. And I love too that it's not a pre-season. I've been to pre-season NFL games, and they're just useless. You got the third string teams. No one really cares. But this is a season game, so it's going to be all the stakes will be there.
And you said if you don't like rugby league now, you'll never like rugby league, because you've been telling us for a while. The game's never been better and more athletic.
And they've put on some very good matchups as well. So they're sending some stars over there. So we're sending some of the cream of our crop across to Vegas. So I think it'll be a big success.
Yeah.
Paul, the pre-season challenge kicked off Thursday night. The Bulldogs surprisingly beating the Storm.
Yes, well, if you wanted me to get into my season preview, or did you want me to wait until next episode on that? But
I just wanted to have a quick chat about, there's been a couple of games played.
Yeah.
The Charity Shield, the Rabbitohs look like they're going to keep going where they left off last year.
Well, if you're able to steal your own thunder, I will. I've got the Bulldogs in the top 8 this year. So I think it's going to be an exciting year for the Dogs. Phil Gould's cleared out more soldiers than Putin. I think he's 39 players have gone since he arrived. So he's got the broom out, Phil Gould. So you've got a roster there, I think, with that coach who disappointed last year. But I think you'll sneak in at 8.
All right. Well, let's work from the bottom to the top like we always do. I'll stop asking you questions and you can get into your preview. Because
before we go any further, Professor, these are practice matches, Paul. If you want to call them practice matches, why do they have them? Is it because they just have to, or like the Storm the other night?
Yeah,
they played one player that would be in their best 17.
Yeah, you have different approaches to it. I think the one biggest positive is you can see some superstars. I mean, I saw some Rabbitohs players last night that I haven't even heard of, and some of them were absolute guns. So what it is, it's a chance for the clubs to test out their depth. But when you've got the stars walking around in polo shirts, it does undermine it a lot. But if I'm a coach, I wouldn't have my superstars out there risking long-term injuries.
It used to be the thing, Coot, of the AFL, that the AFL Rules Committee could drag out its latest stupid idea.
Yeah, that's right.
Ideas for the first few weeks until they realised how naff the ideas were in the first place. But it sounds like this is actually better, where it's a bit of a nursery thing where you actually get a chance at a relatively high level to test out your players. So it sounds like a good idea, actually.
Well, they played the pre-seasons anyway, and they used to take them to the country and show different towns some matches. But now they've put it into an organised competition. I think it's 100,000 for the winner, which isn't small coin. And it's good to see these young players be in the big lights. So I like it. I'd rather that than just a Mickey Mouse pre-season matches that no one knows much about. But it's not being given, I don't think, too much emphasis over and above what should be the focus, which is the comp itself.
All right, Paul, who have you got at number 17?
Well, our regular listener, Kevin Yap, he can once again reach into his kitchen cupboard and there's another wooden spoon, I think. So that's what he might be finding this year in there. 16 is the Tigers. They've added Jerome Luai, the man who's on over $1 million a year, and took to Instagram saying, "Prove your worth." Well, I couldn't agree more. If you can get those Tigers up into towards the top of the 8, you'll be worth over $1 million a year. But I think you'll find with Jerome Luai, it's going to take some time, and he's not used to playing without Nathan Cleary outside him. So I've got the Tigers at 16. Speaking of taking some time, I've got the Titans at 15. I think Des Hasler, the surprise addition there. He needs to really get that team in shape. They had a worse defence than Ivan Milat last year, the Titans. So they'll need to be much, much better. I don't think they'll get there quick enough. The Raiders, I've got at 14. They lost their best player, Jack Whiten, surprisingly to the Rabbitohs. I was very happy about it because he's one of my top players in the league. But they've got some losses there with him and Jared Croker. And they've also got what's got to be surely the first Chevy since Chevy Chase. Chevy Stewart is apparently a name to watch. So he must have been named after a big night of a few frothies and watching National Lampoon's Vacation. You'd have to think the parents, Mr. and Mrs. Stewart there. But Chevy Stewart, so there's a name to watch for you. I couldn't tell you, Professor, who'll be playing in the half for Canberra, and we know what that means. That's not a good outcome if I can't even tell you who's 6 and 7. So then next up, I've got the Dolphins. Might surprise some people, but it's Bennett's final season. There might be some uncertainty there about what's going on. Bennett's transitioning to a coach, Christian Wolf, who's got a very good pedigree with international teams and in England. Wayne Bennett's on the audition for another gig at age 97, I think he is now, but I just don't think that the Dolphins will quite get there. They've added a couple of good players in Herbie Farnworth and Tom Flegler, but I think they'll be 13th. The Sharks are on the slide. They're at 12. They've lost Moylan and Wade Graham, who was the heart and soul of that team. It all rests on Braden Trindle alongside Nico Hines. I don't think the Sharks will make the 8. I've got the Warriors at 11, which is a shame because I would love the Warriors to be successful for the game in New Zealand, but I just can't see them getting ahead of the teams above them that I'll rattle through. Parramatta is at 10. I just don't know whether they'll quite make the 8 given the teams above them. North Queensland at 9, Professor. I don't think that they'll quite sneak into the 8, but there's some talent in both those two teams. Wouldn't be surprised if they sneak in. So did you want me to pause for breath there?
I just want to say, Paul, that Chevy Chase, by the way, in terms of being named, Chevy Chase is actually a place in Maryland, and the actor was named after his name was Chase, and he was named after the town. So a bit of trivia, just like to, like trivia on the show. So that's where the name actually came from, as the town. So your man is actually named after a town in Maryland.
There you go. So
yeah, thanks.
Totally useful information, but
Yeah. No, next time I go to a trivia night, I'll be all over that.
It's a very low bar for usefulness on this panel, I think. So, with all respect, of course.
Oh, we've got the Warriors down lower this year. Is that on the back of the release of their big prop, or just they overachieved last year?
Yeah, I think the combination of both those things. I've looked at the teams above them, and it shows how good the standard is. That the team who can be very good on their day, they can beat anyone on their day. The Warriors, more so than ever. They used to be the most unpredictable team in Australian sport, but I think that there's the teams above them just have a bit more quality. But as you say, they lost for Noah Blake, so that's a big loss.
Well, the Warriors' big problem was COVID, of course. I think they actually lived over here for a couple of years, didn't they? And it seemed to me it took a while to get back on their feet, but now COVID's over. Do you think they'll be a lot more stable team?
They will be stable, and Sean Johnson there, but he's getting towards the end of his career. But for them offering to stay in Australia, the game would have been over. It would have been too hard to reschedule the draw, and they made such a sacrifice of 2 years of their life to live in Australia. Literally, the NRL would have been over if they didn't make that sacrifice. So I don't think they've got enough credit for that from the fans and other teams.
And I don't think they ever will, Paul. Like, it was, you're right. They lived here for 2 years. Redcliffe was their base, obviously prior to the Dolphins coming in. But when they went home to play, they got a hero's welcome that you would think down the track, and again, this is just spitballing out there, that instead of having it in Brisbane, what's the round called?
Which one?
Where they get everyone to play in Brisbane.
Oh, the Magic Round.
Yeah, why couldn't they do that in New Zealand? Purely because of what they've done for the game of rugby league survived because of them.
Yeah, and we're talking about guys that were missing births, missing family weddings, missing people passing away. It was just unbelievable what they did for the game to keep it going. So the ultimate respect for them, but just on the park, I can't see them eclipsing those above them.
All right, Paul, let's look at your top 8.
All right. Well, you're there, Professor. It's been a few years, I think. So the promised land. I think you'll sneak in at 8 with quite a lineup. The bookies don't agree with me, but that's never stopped me. But Matt Burton is going to be the key. You've added one of my favourite players and one of the best players in the game, Stephen Crichton. And a guy to watch out for is just back from a ban for performance-enhancing substances, Bronson Xerri, who could be close to the fastest player in the game. So he's going to be one to watch there at the Bulldogs. I really like the look of your team this year. Then
I can't say it, Paul. I've witnessed the cavalcade of players that have gone through the Bulldogs over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm not as bullish as you are, but if they make the 8, I will certainly be very happy.
Well, Professor,
Yeah, well, I'm hoping you can get there, Professor. So even though my kids in the background sound pretty excited at the moment, I hope it's about the Dogs.
well, Professor, like the team or the players that got, I know that teams on paper, but the addition of, as Paul said, one of the best centres in the game in Crichton, and then Bronson Xerri, who looked terrific the other night. If you do get to have a look at Bronson Xerri, check his nose out. I think he's had some issues over the years, and it's a bit Peter Duddenish sort of Voldemort sort of look about it.
Oh, is it?
So, but they've got names all over the park, and at the end of the day, like Burton, Crichton, the other one that looked great the other night, Paul, in the game the other night was the Fox on the wing. Once he gets a bit more football, he's pretty exciting, that player.
Yeah, well, with that lineup, he's been like Mozart on a toy piano out there on the wing, so there's not much you can do without the ball. So they've added some seasoned footballers as well, Josh Curran, Kurt Mann, so they've got that depth as well of one of my favourite expressions, the footballers. The Gould's no fool. He's adding a good team there. So I think they're going to be on the up. They have to be.
All right, at number 7, Paul.
7, I've got the very exciting Newcastle Knights. They finished the season amazingly well. Kalen Ponga would have to be close to one of the best in the game. It's a bit touch scary for New South Wales that Queensland's got the choice of Reece Walsh and Kalen Ponga for fullback because they're both freakishly good players. But that Knights team and that coach they've invested in, I think they're really on the up and up. So I've got them at 7. At 6, I've got Manly with Luke Brooks being added. It's not often that you hear a suburban ground being nicknamed in name of the player when he hasn't even played for them yet. Luke Brooks has turned it into Brooksvale instead of Brookvale there, which is their home base. So they're already starting to get around the Luke Brooks revolution at Manly. They've got Anthony Seibold there, great coach, unusual methods, but I think he'll get the best out of Manly. They're on the up, that team. And then No,
I was just going to say, so that's good news for Schooner.
it is. I really think they're on the up and up, but I think that is where the end, and this is, he might not like hearing this, I don't think any of the teams I've rattled through can win the comp. And there's 5 who can, and we'll kick it off now. I've got the Roosters at 5. They looked incredibly impressive in their trials to date. One issue there is one of their best players, Suwali, is off after this year to rugby union. That has caused some divisions in that team, I've heard. But they have Tedesco as well at the end of his career. But that can go 2 ways. He might want to end on a high, or Father Time might be catching up with him. So there's just a couple of question marks there at the Roosters, which means I don't have them top 4 when most commentators certainly do. I've got the Storm at 4. And largely on the back of Pappenhausen looking back, ready to go. So I don't want to put them any higher because I just don't think they're at the calibre of the 3 I'll mention. And I'll go through them. Panthers, their run's got to stop sooner or later, surely. It's like being at the casino and the last 10 spins are red. You can't keep going forever. They've got to end sooner or later, but they still seem to keep making it happen, largely on the back of Nathan Cleary. I've got them at 3. I did predict last year would be the year of the rabbit. It wasn't. The Chinese got it wrong. I've got them second, the Rabbitohs, and I think that the Broncos will win it all with a amazing team. Kevin Walters appears to be able to coach, despite some players a year or so coming out saying Adam Reynolds is the coach. Maybe Reynolds could now become the wrestling coach, but that's another issue for you there, given recent events. So that's my rundown of the top 8 this year, Professor, and you've squeaked in there, but I think it's going to be a Broncos premiership. They should have won it last year. I can't believe they lost that match, and they'll only be better this year.
Well, I don't follow your logic on the Panthers. The casino analogy doesn't work for me. They've just been superior, and which generally means they win. But do you think they have dropped somewhere, or the Broncos have, I don't know, gone better somewhere, or?
They might break the rule in that they always say that your premierships aren't won with your stars, they're won with the bottom of your list, and that's in any code.
Yep.
Because all of these teams have superstars. The Panthers are running out of those players at the sort of the edge level of their list, and every year they lose star players. To lose Stephen Crichton, who arguably was he'd be in the top 3 best players in those Panthers wins over the years they've done it. So you just can't keep losing stars and it not affect you. It just law of nature. You can't lose components and still be the same entity. So I just think that the Rabbitohs as well looking particularly impressive last night. It was against the Dragons, but I was very excited at the Rabbitohs team this year and seeing how many stars we've got in polo shirts there last night. And we still looked amazing.
Well, you're always excited about the Rabbitohs, so we'll take this moot.
I had 40 years of mostly agony, so it's a different feeling to what it used to be for many, many years. But this is a serious team. Demetrio, the coach, is going to be working hard because there's rumours Wayne Bennett may even be coming back to the Rabbitohs if Demetrio doesn't get them deep into the finals this year.
All right, Paul. Well, we'll sit back now and wait for the rounds and the finals to play out, and let's see how you've gone. But a great summary as always.
Thank you. And we'll make sure we get to the Dogs and Storm. I know it wasn't much fun. It was last year we went, wasn't it? But I assure you it'll be more close game this year, which won't be difficult.
Paul, the biggest issue with the Storm would have to be their forward pack. If they had a forward pack that could give meters or post contact, it would allow Jerome Hughes, would allow Munster, Pappenhausen that space and time to be able to conjure up some more magic. And I think that's their biggest concern or biggest worry going forward is that they don't have, other than Nelson probably, they don't have that forward meterage.
Well, we've got Harry Grant there, but I agree with what you're saying. It's just that the edges of the pack aren't there, and there's just not the talent behind them that there was in years gone by to cover for some sort of workman-like types. But you're right, I think they understated the effect of losing the Bromwich brothers and Belusi to the Seagulls.
All right. Well, while we're talking about the NRL, Paul, I see
Dolphins. Sorry.
The AIS have released new guidelines for concussion. Participants in community or youth sport will be required to sit out for 21 days after concussion. Children 19 and under must be symptom-free for 14 days before returning to contact training, not to playing in a match, but to contact training. And on the back of that, the NRL are now considering limiting contact at training. So apart from one commentator thinking that no tackling in footy is rubbish, it seems that everybody else is getting on board.
That's exactly what I call it soft. The game's soft.
It's exactly what our expert Alan Pearce has said all along. It's not about the big whacks that causes you damage. It's the repetitive nature of consistent impacts. So any body training would be consistent impacts that would accumulate towards concussion. I completely agree with that.
Paul, the good doctor was castigated by I was going to say journo, but a reporter or whatever, a commentator on 3AW, and his scientific evidence against the good professor was that his 14-year-old daughter had been playing for 3 years, and the tackling had never and the bumps had never hurt her. So therefore, it was just a whole lot of nonsense. And I just said to the good professor, just remember what the first 2 letters of awful are. And that's a bloody radio station for you. But that also shows what the the experts have got up against. They're up against is so-called commentariat experts challenging them on very old and outdated beliefs.
One of the things, Judge, is when you talk about commentary and that is that they're coming from the old school. Like this uneducated sort of, it was a hard game, it was tough, and we're now gone soft and all this sort of stuff. Now, if they actually stood away and looked at the effects that the hits have had on players over the years, and like say Shane Tuck as an example, right? Yep. Would they want that for their kid?
Exactly right.
Like Jesus, are we really at a stage where it's like, it hasn't happened to my kids, so guess what? It's all okay. Now, it was 13 days at junior footy from a concussion. We've had people say that if they get a doctor's certificate, the kid can play. Now, 13 days means they miss one game and miss training, but isn't the long-term health of your child more important than playing one game as an under 12 or an under 11-year-old? They're not going to get drafted as an under 11-year-old. So
it's a dangerous mentality, Cooter, to go back to the old days. And the other thing is, as we've said, and Paul certainly said in relation to rugby league, the players have never been stronger, faster, fitter, more dedicated. So you can't say the game's soft now.
No.
What we're trying to do is save lives and save brains. And so I actually think for uneducated commentators to spout this stuff is actually dangerous.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Judge, definitely. All right, gentlemen, thank you for your contributions today. Excellent, as always. The Gelding can't be with us today, but he has phoned in his tips for sale racing this afternoon. Race 4, horse number 3, Sassy Boom. Race 5, number 4, Man's Ear. And race 7, number 8, Bossa Nova Lad. And he wondered, Paul wanted to know whether you were on Frisky Frida yesterday. He did think that she needed the run and will be much better off at the next start.
Oh, I thought he was asking what I got up to last night, but no, I wasn't on board. It's a shame he's not here because I wanted to ask how he thinks Gillon McLaughlin will go coming up against Peter Volandis, and not AFL versus NRL. It's going to be state racing versus state racing. So I'd be very interested to see his thoughts on that.
Mark, just on Paul Dalligan, because I say he started the year very well. 9+ zingers today. And why I say plus, I thought that AA meeting at Dan Murphy's was worth a 1+.
Oh, thank you.
That was very good.
All right, gentlemen. Good to see we're in good form to start the year, and I'll look forward to talking to you